Hello everybody! I know that the camera looks crazy. We're going to be using it to a minimum. For whatever reason, the capture card decided to give out at some point between yesterday and today, and every setting I changed, everything I did didn't have any effect, so apologies for that. We'll keep the camera to a minimum. How is everyone doing today? Welcome everybody on YouTube. Welcome everybody on Twitch. Thank you for making it. I'm very excited to show this off. We've been working incredibly hard on it, so I hope everyone is doing well. We've got Sid, Scott, Gumbo, Oliver, Tobias, Mumphies, Dean. Oh man, so many names coming in. Junior and Sage. Welcome, Kent, Jeff. More names popping in every second. Intelligent, Machine, Meeks. I hope everyone is doing awesome. Again, apologies for the camera, but I'll troubleshoot it more later. I might be popping onto the Maxon stream in a little bit as well, so I really hope I can figure it out before then, but what are you going to do? Anyway, we've got a lot to cover. Because it is a launch of a plugin today. We've been working so hard, like coding and prepping and launching a plugin takes a lot of effort. My brother that was focused on this one because, you know, it's me and two brothers. That is Rocket Lasso. And the Ricochet launch a couple weeks ago was one brother, and this is the other. So this is from Joe, and he had a couple until 4 o'clock in the morning nights getting things wrapped up and whatnot. But I am very, very excited. What is the brand new Mesh To Spline? Well, it's a new plugin that we created, continuing the theme of splines, and it can be found under your plugin or extension dropdown. It is compatible with Mac and PC, as well as Cinema 4D R20 and beyond. So I think that covers most everyone. I think that's like 90% of active cinema users are in at least those versions. And the reason we didn't make any of these plugins older than that is if you go before that, you can't use fields. Like fields didn't exist before then. And let's see if that works. Excellent. Yeah, this is the one I was hoping to find. So here is, well, let's even just make this from scratch because it's fun. Okay, so I want to step through this step by step and we can take a look at it. So what do we have here? Well, I've got a car, and this is just a car from the asset browser, or content browser if you're in older versions of Cinema. So searching for the word car under objects, let those pop up, and there it is. The car hot hatchback is the one this is, but it works with any of them. And these are just the built-in Cinema cars. So I did almost no prep on this. What I did do, actually I'll just show you, because why not? What I did was we load in the car, and the car comes in with a bunch of extra stuff. So the first thing I did, I deleted the car rig, I unhid the layer, show everything, and then inside the car we end up having all these different body parts. A couple important things. There's just a lot of polygons here that don't look good, so I don't want that many. So you can use the filter on, and I do this all the time. If you've never used the filter, it's really good. Under objects, it's every type of object that is currently in the scene file. So if I double click that, I have now selected every single subdivision surface. So in this case, I disabled them. And then the only other thing is the wheels in the scene file are, if I select all of them, they are actually set up as render instances, and render instances, all sorts of things in Cinema get confused by those. You can't really throw them in a connect object or anything like that. So I just set that to instance. So that's all the prep that I did. And then I took the individual parts. Let's say I took like the front left wheel and I dragged it into these connect objects, just so that's one. You know, here's, well, let me turn them all off and turn them on one by one. So here's the car body as one object. Here is like the interior. Here's the glass, and just an easy way of cleaning that up for demo purposes. Okay, so we've got all these different objects. Under extensions, I can open up Rocket Mesh To Spline, and it's got a lot of interface similarities to Ricochet. We can drop something directly as a child. So I can say, okay, body, go inside. And the instant I do, it's actually, let me unhide it. It'll actually consume whatever you feed in as a child because it's a generator, and it's now returning a spline. This is a spline now. Alternatively, and my preferred method, is to set source geometry to objects, and the object will be the body of the car. And in this, we have some new settings. We have this eyeball button, and if you click on that, then it's actually going to turn off the stoplight on the object, and I can click it again and put it back to neutral. It's just a good way of getting that cleaned up and in your scene file quickly. And you can turn on, I'm gonna hide it, and if I turn this on and off, that means I can stop it from calculating inside of a Mesh To Spline. I can feed multiple objects in here. But this is currently set up the way I want to. We now have a twirl up so that we can hide those objects if I don't need to see them. So here are the basics, and the settings are really fun. Man, there are so many applications of this. I'm a little bit sad that we came out with this so quickly after the previous one, because I didn't have enough time to fully explore all the possibilities. But to begin with, this is currently taking the edges of all those polygon objects and it's returning them as splines. And it's currently returning them as edge to spline. So first of all, the first setting, threshold. Let's increase that threshold and you'll see that a whole bunch of these lines begin to disappear. This is behaving almost exactly like the bevel deformer, where the bevel deformer has this angle threshold and only the sharpest edges will get generated as you increase this. Same idea here. Only the sharpest angles are remaining. So we're getting rid of the most subtle of angles and we end up with these sharp angles instead. So right there, really fun, clean combination. Next up is offset. So that will just take every edge and offset it from the surface. In this particular instance, it's not going to look great, but in other ones, that is amazing. So we'll talk about that later. Next up, we have connect, and currently we are outputting it as the edge to spline algorithm that Cinema has, but you can also say, I want it to be exploded. And once you explode all the segments, we can change the length of the object. So I could actually pull back on the individual edges scale and make those shrink really tiny or sort of get this dotted line look. So that's another option. But then let's move on to facing angle, which is really cool and powerful. So facing angle, currently we see every single edge being generated here. But if I move into our facing angle, it behaves a lot like the Fresnel. So the idea here is if I activate it, so it's currently based on the current view, only normals that are facing towards us will be drawn. So let me show you. You see this side of the car door? There's no polygons or edges showing up there. If I spin around, you see that they are there, but now the other door is not showing them. So we're only seeing the front side of this object. Now, we can change these sliders. I could erase out from the front. And once again, imagine this like a Fresnel. I can pull back on that, or we can increase the one in the back. We've also got some shortcut buttons, so I can say I want to see all of it, just the front of it, just the back of it, or just the outline. And the outline is just kind of catching the ones on the edge. So we could expand that a bit, expand that a bit. It's almost like a little bit of like cross-hatching on the roof there. And as I rotate, you see it's actually updating based on our current camera angle. So that's all pretty cool right there. This is locked to our current camera, whatever our POV is. But if you want to, I can click lock view, and now it's locked to a new camera, meaning I'm free to rotate around, and you see it's not updating anymore. And that's because it's now based on a camera that was generated from where we used to be. If that camera were to move, that will now update based on that camera. Deleting that to free it up again. Let's actually start making this look like something. I think, what do we want? I would like to, let's begin. Well, actually, before we build them up, we'll go through some more options, because why not? Facing angle, I'm seeing everything. We can erase Ngons. We'll check that out later. There is visible only, and it's going to look similar to facing angle. But if I turn it on, what it's going to do is detect edges that are behind bits of the geometry. So you'll see here that I do see that side of the door, but I don't see the things behind the hood anymore. So it's taking a point in the center of the edge and aiming it at the camera. If it collides with a different piece of geometry, well, specifically the same model, then it won't generate that line. This one does take longer to calculate. So as I rotate around, you see it's not quite as quick, but it does offer another cool option, and it works on top of the other one as well. Then we have restriction fields, where we can use a selection tag or a field to limit it, and then a point cap just to stop you from throwing in a million polygon object and it freaking out. So there's just a point cap, and it gives you some information back. So those are the basic settings. There are more advanced settings that we'll get through. Things like under threshold, I could increase this a bunch, or even just a little bit, and then I control that down and do something like invert to get the opposite. So these are the very smooth lines, not the sharp ones, but the smooth ones by inverting. So lots of cool power there. Okay, let's move on. And first of all, take a look at the icon. So the icon looks different from the dropdown, where you see this sort of an outline and some polygons and some edges, and that's because we have 3 different modes. So if I change this from edge mode to polygon mode, it's actually going to update the icon to represent that you're in a different mode. It's really handy when you end up having a whole bunch of these, which I think I'm going to end up having a lot of these all the time. The settings are very similar if we're in polygon mode, where we have the same threshold to change, And you see it's a little bit cleaner though because it's actually erasing out entire polygons. Actually, important to note that now that we're outlining polygons, what it is doing is it's not tracing that edge, but instead it's tracing the perimeter of every individual polygon. So if I were to decrease our growth, you see every individual polygon is shrinking. So those could shrink to 0, those can go negative, those can go beyond 100% because I love unclamping every value, every single value that I can unclamp, I always unclamp it and allow it to go negative. So those are polygons, but let's not talk about the trace outline yet. We'll instead just jump straight to outline mode. And if we go to outline mode, it is currently showing pretty much a perfect outline of the entire car because these are individual segments. Those are individual polygon groups. And it's now outlining the perimeter of every single one of those. You'll see this better later on, but for now, we can see every single one based on the front facing angle, or we could do it based on the visible polygons. And that gives us a nice clean outline. Technically, you can actually make nice outlines with the polygon tool as well. I could increase a threshold all the way. If we go all the way, now it just shows the perfect outline of everything, and it's a completely stable setup. So let's begin actually filling out this car a little bit. So I would like this bit of car to, let's just make it like a nice dark outline. So I'll set this to the color black, just so in the viewport it's showing up as black. And let's rename this to outline. And I would, because it's the outline, let's offset it by 1. So I'm going to offset it so it just pushes out a little bit. Now, making a duplicate of this, let's get some highlights going. So we'll go into edge mode. And in edge mode, I would like to see edges that are decently sharp, but they don't have to be maximum sharp. So something like this. You see we get these nice sharp angles popping out from everywhere. And once again, completely stable. There's nothing popping in or out as I rotate. That would be different if we turn on facing angle, but yeah, so we got these edges. So let's make this the highlight, setting this to, let's do a different color. I guess we'll go with a blue. So these are some highlight colors. So I'll go a little bit lighter and brighter. Deselecting, now I've got some blue highlights. Those will now be the highlights. Making another duplicate. Let's just have this one be, you know, the standard mesh for it. And that one I can set to kind of any mode I want. We can stay on edge and decrease this all the way. And I don't want this colliding perfectly with our highlights, so I will offset this to -1. The highlights I'll set to regular 0. So now we've got the main mesh. This is going to be the main body of the car. So I'll make that a darker, deeper blue. So if I deselect that, now you see I've layered up several series of lines quickly, and you see how quick this is in the viewport. That is showing the overall mesh really quickly, really cleanly. So we can duplicate this and continue pushing things even further if we like. Let's make a outline duplicate, and I'll name this, well, this one, let's just feed in a different source object. This one can be our glass. So feed in the glass, and now you see all of the glass windows have popped in. So this can be made white to show for the glass. Get those highlighted. And let's make a, I'm going to pull highlights as a duplicate, and we'll just call that wheel. So that can be one of the tires. I'll set this immediately to a nice dark color. Not black, but that can now be fed. Let's feed in the wheels. And yeah, those are, there's some wheels popping in. And let's check our angle. Yeah, so those are, I guess that's more of the rim. Did I do those? Oh yeah, I guess I named them backwards. So rim and wheels are named backwards. Anyway, so there's some of the wheel. Those are sort of the hubcaps. So let's make that a brighter gray. And now duplicate that again. And I would like that one to be the wheels. So I'll go darker and feed in the wheels. So that pops in now. Because, oh no, look, okay, good. I'm glad that popped up because now we're feeding in all those wheels. So we've exceeded the point cap, and you see a warning pop up saying, hey, there's a lot of points here. So right here, I can see that we have a limit, but there's, even though there's, well, there's 81,000 points coming in with all those tires, but an edge is actually being seen multiple times. Like each edge is used multiple times to make different bits of the spline. So your used point count can be even higher, but this is fine. I can just click override and that will set it exactly to the amount. And now you see all those tires pop in. So again, now those are generated as splines. these wheels I could simplify more if it's showing too much detail. Find a nice equilibrium there. Excellent. Now we got those tires. And just to wrap it up, let's not do the car interior this time, but what do I want? I'll make let's grab the highlight one. And that can be on the assorted, which is, I think, like the car headlights and whatnot. Put that in. Yeah, so now I've got the car headlights and some extra details there. It's already a nice light blue. I guess I'll go a little bit lighter. Also, get some more points in there. There we go. The override button, very handy. So we'll lighten that up a bit. There we go. So now you can see I've converted this car into a whole bunch of different splines. But let's make this render out. So we've got all these materials. We don't actually need any of them. And you saw that I've been coloring these so I can see it in the viewport really well. But here is a really nifty trick I've been super enjoying. So I'm going to do this with Redshift, but we could do it with any third-party renderer. So making a brand new Redshift material, double-clicking to pop that open. What would I like to do? Well, I am thinking that let's search for a user data. So here's a color user data, and I would like to output what? Well, I'd like to output the object's display color, and that will become the overall emission color. So let's do an emission color on this. So no diffuse, but overall I do want an emission color. So now what's really cool about this, and I've been using this technique all over the place, is this material can now be applied to everything, but it's going to take on the color that I feed through the object. So that is now black. This one would be a light blue. So those are not going to directly render until we add a Redshift object tag and say, hey, mode, I would like to render these out as hair strands, or let's do capsules because those have like a little bit of dimension to them. And we'll just leave that default and take a look at how this might look. So Redshift, render view. I'm not even sure what kind of settings are set up or environment. Let's make sure that the interiors are not rendering. Turn off that geometry. And there we go. Now we're left with just the car. So now we've got a Sketch Toon type look on top of this car, but look at how quick that's rendering, like in Redshift. Like I've got a decent machine here, but like the speed that we can get these results out is pretty crazy. So let's stylize this a little bit more. I'm going to select the blue one. So we've got our, let's grab that one. And I want that to have way thinner lines. So I'll set that to 0.2. Yeah, make those more subtle. And we've got the highlights, and I like them, but let's pull back on them a bit, say at 0.5. Make those a little paler. The outline here, I think that is the glass, so I'll just rename that. Under glass, we'll set that also to 0.5. And yeah, now look at how quick that set up. It's insane. Let's make a little bit of a background. Actually, I'll make a giant sphere. I did that last time and it looked really cool. So if I make a giant sphere, and we'll throw that same material on there, and let's say we're making some sort of blueprint render. Let's say on, and let's try and go with actually a darker, paler, not fully saturated blue. Yeah, just to fill in that background. I was kind of designing the car not specifically for this environment, but now you can see that popping out in the background. There's a small reflection on the ground. Actually, I wouldn't mind emphasizing that a bit. Where is that reflection actually coming from? Oh, I guess it's not the sphere itself, is it? Maybe it is. Well, I would like to make a floor, and I don't think you could, I don't know if Sketch Toon allowed you to do this. I'll just make a new material and drag that onto the floor. Oop, not a cinema material. Whoops. A new Redshift material. Drop that onto the floor and make it, I'm going to just make it 100% reflective. So base color, no color. And I want it just to be reflecting. So what's the best recipe for that? I always forget. We've got reflection. That's our IOR. Is it just setting that down though? I don't think it's setting it to 1. We need some IOR in there. I'm blanking on like the Fresnel effect. Because it fades out on the edge, and I'm forgetting how to stop that from happening. Maybe you just crank it up. Well, okay, that's cranked up. It's not fully blending. I'll have to look up how I did that before, but I'll just crank up some roughness on that. And it's hard to show this on one little monitor. But yeah, if I start pulling back on the roughness, yeah, there we go. You can see that we're actually reflecting kind of these Sketch and Toon lines in this environment. And let's see if anybody knows how I could make that be. Oh, there we go. I just pulled the IOR down to 0. So there, that's what I want to do. Now it's 100% perfectly reflective. So now it's seeing that giant sphere, and now it's just kind of floating in nowhere, but we get a reflection from it. And man, I love it. So yeah, now you see almost instantaneous renders. When I was doing an animation, in fact, let me try and pull up this animation. Open up file and go and track down renders, car reveal, car blueprint. I'm gonna hit pause really quick because there's probably audio. So I started working on a demo of this a couple days ago. Like only 2 days ago, and I was going off to eat a meal. I was like, oh, I'll set up a quick render so it'll be done by the time I come back. And I set it up with decently high render settings, and I said, okay, render, and I took a glance at it right before I walked out of the room, and it was going like frame, frame, frame. I was like, whoa. So I like cranked the render settings way up. So this entire final animation took 12 minutes to render. So yeah, that entire thing, only 12 minutes to put that entire render out at 1080. So I was like super blown away by how cool and quick that stuff can be. And almost pretty much everything you're seeing here is a copy of Mesh To Spline. You get even the grid in the background, these little grids on the ground, the sketching on the outside of Mesh To Spline. This is Redshift doing Sketch and Toon type effects. But look, they're 100% stable. There's no popping, no jitter. We have complete control over it. And even just throwing in just a model from Cinema, I was able to build this pretty quickly. So man, there are so many different possibilities. Just playing with this, let's play with it a little bit further, because why not? I'm having fun here. I will hide those in the viewport. So we saw that we can do the front and back. So if we take this main mesh, let's rename this one front, and then I'll make a duplicate of that and call that one the back. So with those two, I can go in and say, hey, I want to do the viewing angle. And on the front, I'll say, yes, look at the front side of it. On the back, I'll say I want to view the back side of it. So now one's in the back, one's in the front. There's no overlap between them because they're perfect opposites now. So the back one, I'll say, hey, that's in the back. It calls less attention to itself, so that will be way darker. And now you can see that indeed that one is darker than the one in front. And as I rotate around, it'll just pop from one to the other as it crosses that threshold. Duplicating this outline, I could make a second outline if I wanted to. We can take that and push it out into the air a little bit. We can go way far, something crazy. I don't know how stable this will be, but let's push that out extra far like that. And let's give it a transparent version of this material. So I will make a duplicate of it so that we can still maintain our color. And then under overall, I'll say, okay, opacity, you're going to be pretty transparent overall. That can be fed onto this copy of outlines, and I'll say that that outline should be double thickness. And let's start taking a look at what that might be returning. Go. So we should have a line that's extra far down. Yeah, you can see it right there, kind of a faint line. So if I change the color of that, we can make something that's sort of scribbly looking. So yeah, there's a white line. If I push that further, it's kind of like, oh, that's a sketchy line that is away from the model where they were, you know, maybe doing a little bit of practice and they didn't quite have the line where they wanted it. So if we were to take that line and push it out, let's go a little extra far. So you see how those are pushing out extra? We can now turn on fields, and when I turn on fields, it'll activate this offset field tab. So I can feed in something like, you know, a linear field or anything, but in this case, how about a random field? And the instant I do, you see the randomness is changing how much those values are offset. It's a multiplier on the offset in this case. So I could, let's start increasing the overall scale until we start seeing a bit more uniformity. Yep. There we go. Now you can see I've got these wiggly lines on the outside getting displaced by this random field. And yeah, we get those sketchy lines. You can imagine making duplicates of this. I can make a second one and make sure that this one is indeed linked to that one. Change the random seed on that. And now I've got two different sketchy lines on top of each other. Maybe this one's a little bit thinner and the other's a little bit thicker. And yeah, you can layer and layer and layer. And you see how quick I'm putting this together from scratch. Exactly the look I want and so incredibly quick. And, you know, spending a little bit of time, you can start animating this. Like, there's a lot of different animation tricks you could do on top of it, erasing out different sections of the car. Like, as a quick, for instance, I will grab, let's just grab that polygon and that polygon. So that's the front and the back. And under restrict, I will turn on restrict to fields. So I'm restricting to the field. And in this case, I'll just make a linear field, set that to Z+. And now E for move. And now you can see that I can drag this through, and it's only going to draw them where the fields overlap where the mesh is. So I just draw that on like this. All that's happening right here in the viewport for you to be able to play with, manipulate, control, do anything you want. And once again, unlocking, I'm sure this would work great in, you know, something like Arnold that does have a toon shader, but the third-party renders that don't have a toon shader, this is like absolutely incredible. Popping this open, it should be partially drawing that. Make that maximum, and look at how quickly that resolves. And now most of the render time is coming from this reflective floor and not the actual lines. But man, it is so much fun to play with this thing. If you are supporting on Patreon, you get whatever amount you're supporting at +1 as a coupon off. So if you are supporting at the $10 level, you'll get an $11 coupon. If you're supporting at the $20 level, you get a $21 coupon. And if you're supporting at a $50 level, you get a $51 coupon. So you can totally, you know, those are discounts there. And that's for the appreciation for people who are supporting on a regular basis. So let's move on to something else fun. That was neat. I like this. I kind of feel like I should save this. Yeah, I will save this because these can become available for people supporting on Patreon. So here's the launch party episode. There are the scene files. Nope, that's not the right file. Scene files. So car, yeah, that's the same name as I keep it. So there we go. I would like to, I got to open up the T-Rex. Let me see if this is set up properly. Oh, wait, I'm going to pull this onto the other monitor for a second because it's probably already preset up in, oh, no, okay, cool. It wasn't overly preset up. I didn't want to spoil the detail, although some people probably saw this in the animations. But here is a T-Rex, also from the content browser. This is made by Sebastian Florend a while ago, but man, I love the animation on this thing. I love the very clean poly count. If I hit play, you're going to see he does this amazing stomping animation. Love it. Now, I did delete out the controls and baked it to Alembic so that the animation itself isn't slowing down. The character animator in Cinema has a lot of overhead, so I got rid of that, baked it to Alembic. But what's cool is if you bake something to Alembic and you make it editable, there's still the Alembic animation tag on top of it, the Alembic morph, which means this is a live mesh, but it has the Alembic animation, meaning I can still make selections on this thing even as it's moving, which is pretty amazing. Well, once again, I love the T-Rex. So how much do we want to do this from scratch? I'll do it pretty much from scratch. So I've already set up a couple of selections on this character, but let's make one from scratch. Let's see. Right here I have a selection tag called jewelry. If I double click it, you can see, I guess it already had the neck. I'll deselect the neck and override it. Here's a cool thing in S24. There's the new selection tag buttons here. So I can just click update on the tag and it's now updated that selection, which is amazing. I can't say how much I've been using that. So anyway, here's a selection, an edge selection, and it's selecting his wrists and around his ankles a couple times. And now I will select around his neck, duplicate this tag and say update and rename that one to neck. So again, very handy new thing you can do in S24 with selection tags. So now there is a selection around his neck and a selection around, if I double click this one, selection around his ankles and wrist. So creating a brand new Mesh To Spline. Anybody just tuning in, the new plugin from Rocket Lasso just launched today. I would like to indeed trace the edges, so remote link into the body of the T-Rex, and now every edge is getting outlined, which is, you know, always fun. All the same settings work, of course. I could change the threshold and lower those lines down, or again, do the opposite by inverting. But yeah, lots of options. But in this case, I would like to limit it to a selection. So I will restrict it to a selection, and the selection will be the jewelry. And the instant that I do, you now see I have a spline returning only where those selections were. Now, I also have the neck selection. And what if I want to put a necklace on the T-Rex? Well, I can click Add New Selection and add a second unrelated tag. So now that one is there as well, getting returned from the same Mesh to Spline object. So creating a brand new sweep. I'll move this down below the object. When you remote link into an object with spline tools, just in general, even in the tracer object in Cinema, make sure that it calculates after the object that's being fed in, just because it's that particular order of operations in the object manager. But anyway, dropping that into the sweep, I will feed that an end side, increase the number of sides, T for scale to scale that down. You will probably notice that these are broken. They're not closed splines, but inside of Mesh to Spline, under the Spline tab, I can say, hey, close the spline, please. So those are now closed. And then right now it looks a little bit chunky. You can see how there is, there's not that many subdivisions. It's perfectly matching the T-Rex. So I can go into Mesh to Spline, enable the interpret points, and you see it's already smoothing out. Set this to the smoothest mode, which is B-spline, and set this to any kind of subdivision I want. I'll set it to uniform. That's a lot. So I'll just set to uniform 1 just to round it out a bit. So those all get rounded. Let's change the color of those just so it doesn't look like, right now it looks like he's in shackles. I want that actually to be just kind of a yellowy color. So he's got some gold. So there we go. Now he is wearing some bracelets and a necklace. It's a little bit thick right now. We'll scale that down. But they are 50% intersecting the body of the T-Rex. But of course, we've got settings for that. Selecting the Mesh to Spline in the main tab, we just have the offset. So I will offset that by whatever amount I want. And those are now pushing away from the surface. Now, here's something that's really cool. Normally, when you're doing displacement type things, like this is the type of thing we might do with displacement, but displacement is very unstable. It's very unstable on splines because it doesn't know what direction it should be in. But these splines are being generated from the body of the T-Rex. So when I say offset, it's not randomly guessing, it's basing it on the normals of the mesh that it's getting its information from. So these are perfectly pushing away from the body. Now, here is the best part. If I hit play, those are just stuck perfectly to the character. So if this was a rigged up character, if we had jiggle deformer running, oh, let's do that. I didn't even think about it, but let's put a jiggle deformer in the T-Rex because we gotta, I think EJ might be presenting soon for the Maxon live stream, but we gotta sneak a jiggle deformer in here. So I'll do a jiggle. Let's not change anything. Let's just do the jiggle, hit play. And yeah, you can see it's slipping away from the teeth a little bit, but let's go easy on the stiffness and easy on the drag, easy on the structural. And now we're going to get the T-Rex. Like, look how he's all wiggling all crazy. And you can see that still perfectly our Mesh to Spline is sticking to the body of the T-Rex. It's kind of messing up our looping animation, but perfectly sticks to a character. So I'm sure in the past you have tried to make a character and the character needed eyebrows on it, or the character had a belt and you just wanted to get a freaking belt to stick onto the character without having to go and bind it and do all the proper rigging stuff. But now we've got Mesh to Spline. So I'll make a duplicate of that, and this one I'll just name brows. So those are now the eyebrows, and let's find the eyebrows. Double clicking that, you see I've already got a selection tag ready for us. So inside of the brows, under selection, I don't need the jewelry anymore, but I do want to feed in the eyebrows. And currently it's a closed spline, so let's turn off closed. So back to open. So it's now an open spline, and I've already got an eyebrow prepared. So let's drop that in, and now I'm sweeping that selection on the T-Rex, and now he's got some nice big bushy eyebrows as he goes stomping around. Pushing that further, I'll make another duplicate, and this one's just goofy, but I had to do it. Where I've got a selection around the mouth for his lips. So inside of this one, let's link to the T-Rex's lips going around the outside. Let's not offset, and rename it lips, and that one can be fed into the mouth, and there we go. Now we've got some lips on the T-Rex. Hit play, and he's stomping around and perfectly stuck there. We could smooth that out and round it if we wanted to. T for scale, I can actually scale those really big. Some giant luscious T-Rex lips. This one actually should be closed. There we go. So yeah, it's ridiculous, but now he's a duck-billed dinosaur, just like in Land Before Time. So yeah, stomping around, doing his thing. But lastly, For the T-Rex, we've got one more selection, and that is, where is it? The first one. If I double click this one, I've got a spine running along his back. So I just did a selection. You could always hit UM, which is the path selection tool, which is great. They have free path, but live path is a lot better. Live path makes it so I can perfectly draw anywhere I want on something. So that's how I drew that line. So that is now an active selection for that line. We'll do this one from scratch. So a brand new Mesh To Spline, rename it Spine. And that spine is an open edge. It is going to be linking to an object. The object will be the body of the T-Rex. I want to limit it to a selection. The selection will be the spine. And there we go. Instantly, we see that line popping out right where his back is. So taking that, I can feed this. I've already got this prepared a little bit. So let's do this one step at a time here. So there's a sweep, and I put a helix in there. And when a helix, I turned off, it's a helix spline. I've got start radius of 0, end radius of 0, and an end angle of 0 as well. So it just makes a straight line. And now that that's a straight line, I will feed the spine in as the second object, and that should now be sweeping it. But we're not going to see much because it might be like pushing inside the dinosaur. We don't have a direction for it. So we need a rail spline. So if I make a duplicate of this, we can rename this one rail. And how often, oh my goodness, how often have you done the type of thing where you need a good rail spline? A spline that tells you the direction that the other spline should go. And they're so difficult to make. Well, if I take this and I say, hey, offset from the body, once again, these are calculated from the normals of the object, meaning this is a perfectly stable rail spline. So that gets fed in as the third object. And let's turn on the spine. And instantly we see it get generated. I probably should reset this. And yeah, so now you can see it's generating on that rail. But if I wanted to, I can say, yes, use the direction of the rail, but don't use the rail's scale. So if I turn that off, it is now determined by the size of the helix. So I can scale up and down the helix, and we get a T-Rex with a mohawk, which out of the gate is awesome. So yeah, crazy mohawk on the T-Rex inside of the spline. I could change the scale, so we can pull back on the tip of the tail. And let's get a midpoint here, pull back on the tip of the head. And then maybe we want a nice mohawk popping up there. And then around the neck area, I'll make that way skinnier. And now we've made a punk Spinosaurus, nice and quickly, ready to go. Turning on the cloth surface, I can give that a little bit of thickness. And again, if I hit play, that is instantly going to be running. I guess the cloth thickness takes a little bit to calculate, so I'll turn that off. But yeah, now he's got a spine as he's stomping around doing his thing. And like I said, perfectly stable rail spline. Now, here's just a little sneak preview of something we've got coming out. So I don't often talk about sneak previews of plugins, but we've got a plugin coming out soon. It's actually a collection of plugins, and they're spline plugins. So this is a preview. It's not available yet, but it is this smoothing plugin. So let me show you what's going on here. If I pull this rail out, I can push it further. So I can push this beyond, and you see how if I keep pushing out, it's logically going to start crisscrossing itself because the T-Rex crisscrosses itself as it bends in and out. So we've got this kind of squiggly line, and that's why this geometry is kind of hitting itself, because it's just naturally bending that way. Well, if I go in and once again sneak preview, there is the Rocket Spline Helpers, and I can grab the smooth. And this is now a smoothing spline, and this modifies splines you feed in. If I feed the rail spline into it, then instantly, look at that line, has gotten smoothed out. It's still based on this parametric rail, but it's smoothed it out. So here's the number of iterations. So I can increase the iterations, smoothing it more and more and more. Now that that's been smoothed, I could sneak that back inside of the rail and look at that. Now it's smooth on the outside because it is not overlapping itself. Adding some thickness back on again, hit play, and now we've got a perfect ridge running along our T-Rex, just running live on the character, and it's just a whole bunch of Mesh To Splines layered up on top of each other again and again and again. So yeah, the possibilities for doing character animation here are really, really powerful and really exciting. I love this type of stuff. So, let's see. Well, this isn't about the new tool, but I'll answer this one question about the secret preview. Browlius is asking, is the point count the same before and after the smoothing? And yes, it is. Here, let me show you just for fun. So we've got this here, but there's a lot of features inside of the smoothing tool. So I can turn on the tick marks. So I can say, hey, show me where the points are. And you'll see here that the exact same point count is pushing along the rail. And it's just going to get smoother and smoother and smoother as I push it up until eventually, with 211 iterations, it's pretty much a perfectly straight line. But that is based on the incoming spline. Wherever the spline was, that's what this is going to be. Let me increase those so you can see a little bit better in the stream. So yeah, whatever the incoming points are, that is what that is displaying. But there is source points as an option, and we can change this to subdivide to different subdivisions. So I can go to step mode, and now every 5 units, it's creating another subdivision. So we could increase that amount, so there could be fewer and fewer, or I could make there be, yeah, we can go fewer and fewer and fewer. So I've now remapped the number of points that are on that spline, and then I smooth the result of that. A lot of possibilities there. This is not about that, but there's a little sneak preview for everybody here in the live stream. So anyway, getting rid of that. Actually, I'll just hit undo a few times and get this back to a nice looking rail for our dinosaur. So any questions specifically about this? Yeah, today's live stream is entirely about the Mesh to Spline. And, well, I guess it's going to be eating up a lot of my time. And I guess I'm not going to show it off. But just so you know, we are launching another spline tool in only a couple of weeks. And it's not even the one I just previewed. It's a different spline tool. So we got another one coming out soon. So keep an eye out for that. So, yeah, and when it comes to these helper splines, they are going to combine so well with the tool that hasn't, another tool that hasn't released yet. It combines super duper well with Mesh to Splines. It combines really well with Ricochet. It's just for remapping your splines and getting complete control over them. And we didn't really talk about it, but there's 5 different tools that come with it, which is Smooth, Resample, Reduction, Cleanup, and Bezierify. It might just be called Bezier by the time it launches, but that converts a spline back into a low point Bezier spline, which is really cool. So yeah, that is our T-Rex. Yeah, but we had to finish developing that. We had to rearrange our launch schedule. So that was actually going to be the next one to come out, but instead we're launching this and a Mesh to Spline and another one really soon. So let's see, what else do I have demo-wise? Because there's unlimited things we can play with here. But, oh, we should talk about text for sure. Okay, new file. We'll do this one from scratch. Oh, question coming in. Browlius is asking if splines work with dynamics and deformers. Yes, they totally do. The soft body dynamics are very finicky, and we'll get to a file that will show that off a little bit. But you can totally do soft body stuff. You have to bake a couple of times in Cinema. It's just the way soft bodies work. But I'm going to pull up a little animation. Yeah, let me pull up an animation to show that. And let me open up the T-Rex again so you can see something going while I'm hunting. Go T-Rex, go. Okay, so I am looking for the animation folder. And not that one. Oh, there it is. Haha. So, again, there's probably going to be some audio. Actually, I turned off the computer audio, so here we go. And this should loop pretty well. I did a little bit of work to make this loopable. Yeah, it is muted. So this is one of the running animations from the content browser, or the asset browser rather. And then I'm using a bunch of Mesh to Splines on it, and then running soft bodies on it, but telling those soft bodies to have a lot of stiffness and try and stay in one spot. The problem is that soft body, when splines are colliding with splines, they just take a long time to calculate, even if they're made editable. And then in order to sweep them properly, you got to like bake them out as a limbic. So eventually I'll have a tutorial on it. But the process for using soft bodies on this type of object, it's a little bit involved. But yeah, it was really fun to put this together. And like way back in the day, there were some amazing animations that did similar things. So as soon as I got soft bodies working, I wanted to try and make my own version of it. So yeah, you can totally do soft bodies on it. And maybe we'll tackle that a little bit as we go forward. So some text. I will open up a text object. If you're pre-S24, this is the mode text. They just moved it into the model menu, which makes sense, even though it still has a bunch of MoGraph options. I would like to center this, use my favorite new font. I don't think it's a new font, but it's new to me. And that is, where is it hiding? There it is, lemon milk. I love lemon milk these days. All right, so yeah, this is the official font of Rocket Lasso's spline tools. So we got the word text, but let's put in just a nice big RKT. Oof. And make that a little bit thicker. Okay, first of all, we just got some text here out of the box. If I hit NB, we can see that we've got, it's clean because there's Ngons on the front, and we got a bunch of subdivisions on this curve. So creating a new Mesh To Spline. I would like to feed it an object. Now, once again, you can just directly feed it in as a child. Now we're going to be able to take a look at a couple of settings we didn't get to before. Currently, we're in edge mode. A setting we didn't tinker with was erase Ngons. If we erase Ngons, anything that is an internal edge on an Ngon will be ignored. So if I say erase Ngons, instantly it super cleans up the spline going around the text. And keep in mind, this is a spline. So in this case, how about feeding? Well, not quite yet. Let's also take a look at threshold. Now, what's interesting about threshold, that's erasing out the Ngons, and there are reasons to erase out Ngons, but we can also use threshold. I'm going to change this to Polygon Mode because it just looks a little bit better with increased thresholds. If I increase the threshold even 1 degree, it's going to look like we just turn on Ngons, and that's because these front flat faces, there's 0 angle to them, so by crossing that threshold, it erased them out. Those are no longer valid, but we get a really nice outline. But here's what's cool. If I keep on increasing this angle, these, once again, I guess just to be clear, if I zoom up, like there's a polygon, there's a polygon. So if you calculate the angle of the normal coming from those, what is the difference between them? If the difference between them is sharper than 4 degrees, then yes, draw the line. If it's not, then erase out the line. That is what is happening. So as I slowly increase this threshold, anything that has a really shallow angle is going to get erased out. Oh, it's something I should do because lemon, as much as I like lemon milk, there's a couple of points that overlap itself like really closely. So I'll just throw that into a connect to make sure that it binds everything properly. Anyway, you can now see that it's erased out all those edges, but that's kind of like an Ngon erasing. So look at how clean of a return that we're getting from here. And what's really crazy is, yes, that is being treated like an Ngon. So if I take offset and I start pushing that out a little bit, that curve is maintained as a clean line. Like, I'm so happy we got this working. So yeah, you can see as I push that out, that looks really nice. We push this in or out. Oh, we're gonna do some different cool tricks here for sure. So yeah, that's doing the individual. Oh, actually, I might as well show you something that's super crazy here. I'm going to be jumping all over the place because I'm excited. If I set the text to 0 depth, it just creates like a flat surface. There is no, it's only like 1 cap, which is really useful. You should keep that in mind. It's a nice way of generating text quickly. But anyway, that is now still being fed in here. If I were, oh, I lost my train of thought. What was I going to do? I completely lost my train of thought. Dang it. I was going to, I removed the thickness. Well, I completely lost it. Anyway, let's continue on our track here until I remember. What I would like to do is, there's a lot of different things to do. I suppose, let's keep it simple. I'm going to yank this out and move our text to spline, or our mesh to spline, and now we'll feed it text. I'm going to remote in the text, and again, hide the text by clicking the button. Very handy. Don't do any offset, and now we've got the spline. So how about feeding that spline into a volume builder, volume mesher. Okay, volume builder, I want there to be a bunch of resolution on it, a bunch of density to calculate it, and let's lower that down to something small like 3. And now I've got a perfect outline of that text, super clean and entirely parametric setup here. So yeah, those are those edges, but things can get so much more interesting if we'll just turn those all off temporarily, unhide the text. Let's feed this into, actually, just so that the fracture runs quicker, I'll increase the subdivision count there, because I'm going to feed this into the MoGraph Voronoi Fracture. So now it's breaking those all apart into different pieces. So inside of our fracture, actually, oh, this stuff is really cool because even though the text is being eaten by the Voronoi Fracture, we are still getting that outline from the original text. We are able to still remote link into that before it got consumed. But anyway, I want to delete that and feed in the fracture directly. And now you see we are outlining the fracture. Again, hiding this, you can see we get outlines of all of the different fracture edges. Now there are actually more edges, but we're already erasing them out. So you can see the threshold, as long as we're at 1 degree, or alternatively turn on erase Ngons, we get a very clean result. But let's start pushing this a bit further. I'll clean those up. In the fracture object, let's take a look at it. I could push this. Let's do some offset fragments so those push away from each other. Okay, excellent. I like the way that looks. We can also say hull only, so we get the hull breaking apart. So let's see what the fracture looks like there, and you get these great broken apart pieces. I would like to darken that up a bit. There we go. So yeah, we're outlining those individual pieces. A cool thing I thoroughly enjoy doing is in the fracture, let's just set that back down to regular. And if I feed that fracture also into the builder, then we can say, hey, Voronoi Fracture, I want you, come on, Fracture, why aren't you updating? Oh, yeah, it's a hull only. Whoops, that's my fault. I got to tell that to not be hull only. I thought. All right, well, the volume builder doesn't want to see the fracture. Oh, you know what? I probably shouldn't even feed in the fracture. Let's just feed in the text. Let's remote in the text object. There we go. Oh, it doesn't like, the volume builder has quirks, and it doesn't like if something is a child and something else is remote linked into it, it just doesn't like that. But if we remote link both of them, it should work better. Hopefully. Yeah, there we go. So now you can see that those two things are being combined. So we've got our spline on top of it. And this just makes me think of like construction equipment in the US, probably in a lot of places, but you get that perfect like caterpillar yellow orangey color. And it feels like all that cross bracing. So inside the fracture, let's add some more points. So we'll go 2, 2, 2, really break that apart. And yeah, we get all these shapes inside the volume builder. We could make these even sharper. So I'll add a, let's say, voxel size of 1.5 to sharpen that up. And then a radius of 2 just to sharpen those up. Oh, look how nice that looks. But of course, volume builders are, they don't just have to be additive. So I could say, hey, subtract, and now we're taking a byte out of that. So yeah, now it's taking a byte out, and there's even holes traveling through it. So we'd be able to travel all around the interior of this thing depending on where the turns were happening, which is pretty funny. Let's zoom out. And yeah, so there's the text all broken apart, and it just goes on and on and on from here. I would like to, let's yank out the text from inside there. So we just get our final one. Oh, look at that. Look at this shape right out of the gate. Looking super cool. With the fracture, let's put a little bit of offset again, break those apart, and oh, look at that look. Like it's almost like every click here playing with the Mesh To Spline. Any setting that we change in the Mesh To Spline, any setting we change in the text, any setting we change in the Voronoi Fracture, it just leads to like another cool look. Like I love the way that looks. Let's unhide that fracture and look at the individual pieces. Look at these getting filled in and colorized. Like I love the way that looks. And like I said, almost every click is another cool looking effect. Let's go back to the fracture and say, okay, I want to do hull only, which is just going to be the outermost face. And we'll turn off the volume, turn back on our Mesh To Spline. So here is a good opportunity to talk about some of the colorizing options. So you see that the fracture is returning a bunch of different objects, and each object is a different color. Well, let's visually hide the fracture, and you see that the spline is just returning the color black. But if I go into the spline tab, I could say, you know what? This is actually going to output segments based on the input of the object. And Colorize is automatically set to as input as well. So if I deselect that, you can now see that every single spline is taking on the color of the cloner, whatever the cloner's objects were individually. But it's not just those objects. I could also grab this figure and let's set a color to on, and we'll make him a bright pink. And let's also remote link into the figure and hide it in the viewport. Deselect, and you see he's bright pink. Whatever color the objects are will filter through into this. So don't need the figure. In the Mesh To Spline, another important thing to note is now that I said to explode it as input, if I were to make Mesh To Spline editable, it's now going to return a series of splines, and every single one is perfectly corresponding to each individual object that was fed in, and it will even name the segments based on that. So yeah, you can take on the color of the spline, and the spline takes on the color of the object fed in. And that is, again, great for feeding into third-party render engines where these colors could translate directly onto those objects. Okie dokie, moving on to something else. Just because it's a fancy effect, I'd like to have not as many of these, so I'll drop this to 55. And there we go, get fewer chunks now. What I would like to do is set Mesh To Spline to, yeah, we're in Polygon mode. So we could grab Grow and start shrinking these individually. But here's a effect I absolutely love doing. If we make I'm going to feed Mesh To Spline into a cloner. That cloner will be set to linear mode, so I can control exactly how many there are. Now let's just start out with 3, and I'll make a second Mesh To Spline. There's 2 different Mesh To Splines inside of it now, each doing the same thing. And I would like these to blend. So I'll set the cloner mode to blend. So if I take the settings of 1, let's say I shrink the growth, I can offset those and the cloner will blend between every single one of those. So I can say, okay, let's get more subdivisions on that. And now look at those layering up on top of each other. That can even be pushed. Oh, I only just now remembered what I wanted to show. Flattening. I should remember now. So yeah, those are shrinking. Let's go pretty much down. Yeah, let's go to 0. So I'll put those down to 0, and now we can see all these nice stripes. Maybe the fracture doesn't need to offset as much because this is already doing a lot of work for us. Yeah, look at these stripes we're getting. And then grabbing this one, any parameter that can be blended between, we can use. So I can say, okay, let's also offset these, and I can start pushing these out in space. Tell the cloner to have more copies. As it's blending between them, it's going to start looking pretty crazy. But here's what I really like about feeding this into a cloner now, is if I take the cloner and feed it a plane effector, the plane effector is, these are cloned onto the object, so they won't move via an effector, but they can take on the color. So I can say, okay, it's looking at the field's color. So in the fall off, I will feed it a step effector. Step effector, I want to do color, and the instant I turn color on, you can now see that it is stepping through the splines, applying the color. Inside of color remap, I'll say, I actually want a gradient, and now it's applying this gradient. Load a color preset, and let's do flame 1. And that has now been mapped onto all these splines, just transitioning between the two. So yeah, again, this the growth can be set solid. We could shrink that back down again, and you can see it updating really nicely. We could go huge, we could go small, we could grab this and shrink them in and go a little bit negative and let those push inside the object. So many ridiculous combinations. And of course, this is all just extracting from exactly what the Voronoi Fracture is feeding out. So we can go and change whatever this looks like, however we want. We could super stretch them up vertically. We could let's not do any offset. We could add thickness on. That won't look too much like anything. But man, yeah, the combinations here, and then we, again, hide it. Yeah, every single thing we break apart is going to create a new crazy combination. And that is how I ended up making, where's that other window? This, which I was waiting on a new build from my brother as he's working, and I just started like whipping out different combinations and looks, just like I was just doing right now. And over the course of like an hour, I ended up making all of these of just like, oh, let's just combine fracture and the object, fracture, Mesh To Spline, different combinations, and just start throwing them together. And there's like all these effects layering up on top of each other. And if you buy Mesh To Spline, I actually included, let me go track down this folder. I actually included all of these demo files. So this is what you get when you download it and you unzip it. And I have an example files folder, and inside of there are all these different files, and I have an entire folder just called text. And each of these is some of these types of effects, like each of them pre-built. So you can just open it up and reverse engineer and see it. Oh, look at that one. Like, how cool is that? And once again, identical setup to what we were just doing, where we will take these bytes out and just update, type in any text you want, and layer up all of these effects. So yeah, a lot of fun examples in there. I only found this last night as we were wrapping up, but look at these crazy like techie looks we can get because what do we got? We've got a landscape, and then we're looking at the landscape, but I'm saying, hey, restrict only draw the edges where this random field is saying that they are. And then I'm saying that it should outline just the polygons, meaning we get these crazy techie looks on top of that. And the random field, if I give it some animation speed, I can hit play. And now those are animating around doing their thing. And just wait until the secret in the future smoothing comes out. And now look, I could smooth those after the fact. So, and I hit play now and look at them just running here in the viewport. So we got this crazy like stop motion-y water droplet look going. And, you know, of course that's ready to sweep or be rendered by a third-party renderer or Sketch Toon or hair. Like the combinations are absolutely crazy. So let's see, what else do we got? I don't have, because of the shortened timeline on launching this one, I didn't have that much time to do as many demos as I like to do. Oh, that's this guy. This is a pretty straightforward setup. I've got this falling guy, and then I set up an offset and an outline, and it's just being animated by a linear field that's spinning around randomly, which is controlling the offset as a field. So, but it's a really cool, like, wacky effect on top of everything else. Nate, excellent. Natal, thank you for picking up a copy. So, I'm trying to find more objects to do. Oh, okay. So somebody was asking about dynamics. So here is a character. It's actually funny. I just took like a generic mesh and I threw it in the volume builder until I got a mesh that looked nice and did kind of, I wanted it to look all triangulated and low poly. So I was able to put that together. And it's actually still a live link to this running animation. So yeah, with that, this is not baked out to Alembic. It's a live mesh that is bound to it. And you see it, you know, it's translating well. This is just the auto weighting as well, so it looks pretty good. So creating a Mesh to Spline. Let's do it from scratch. Creating a brand new Mesh to Spline. I can feed in, remote into the mesh, and instantly every edge is being outlined. So that's all the edges. I can hit play. Now it's still running. It's still being swept, or you know, it's still converting to edge. We can change that mode. I could change this threshold, and look at the crazy effects that we get here. By decreasing the threshold on these edges, we can see like all these weird effects. Now, obviously the mesh is moving and twisting as it goes, so that will look kind of staticky as it goes. Actually not as much as I thought it would, but these will not be stable. They'll pop around. But yeah, they look cool. Oh, I just saw a cool thing that I haven't shown you yet. Okay, get rid of that, and I'm gonna hide the body here. That sounds bad. Okay, we're gonna hide the entire mesh that is running, and on this Mesh to Spline, oh, I should stop. I'm going to stop him from running. So we've just got the body in the T-pose. So there is the spline on the body. I would like to go into facing angle. Remember we were talking about the view on the facing angle. So now we're only seeing the front. These are only the front edges, not the back ones. I click back and see only the back ones, which does give you like this weird optical illusion. Yeah, you've probably seen online, there's that like Einstein face that spins backwards and we're only seeing the back side of it. So right there's probably some cool renders to be had. And then, as I said, we have the outline, and the outline mode looks kind of cool when it's a very organic figure that's got lots of polygons. And of course, we could spread those out a little bit more, and that's different than the regular outline mode. So anyway, that is an outline there, but there's a completely different mode here. We can change angle mode to range. And once you go to a range, it's very similar to what I was just doing. In fact, it's pretty much identical, except instead of a min and max, we have essentially where is the angle, and then what is the range of that angle. So there's only a range of 5 degrees, but I'll increase that a bit. And if I take the angle, I can actually pull it forward or backward. So once again, imagine this is a Fresnel on the model. And as I pull it forward and backwards, it is kind of, you know, remapping the gradient from the front to the back. But what's cool here is there's an angle rate. And if I crank up the angle rate, over the course of 1 second, it's going to do that amount of animation. So hitting play, it'll actually just start transitioning from the front to the back as this continuous wave. We can overshoot the 180 if we want, have it go quicker. I can type in -180 and have it go back to front. And we can turn that animation back on again, and now it's running, but doing that wave animation on top of it. So, man, so many different combinations. Of just cool ways of playing and tinkering with this. Like it's really fun. And I personally haven't scratched the surface. Even like I said, over the last 2 days, I was like, oh, we can do this. Oh, we can do that. So, and we've already got a list of ideas for 1.1 as well, but we might do a price increase when that happens. So definitely get in early, because if you buy it now, you'll get the updates for free. Or, before the price increase happens. In any case, what were we about to do? Oh, I remember. Let's turn off facing angle. And this is now every edge. I would like to limit to a given selection. So I'll limit to a selection. And right now there isn't one, but I'll turn that off. Inside of the mesh, I've already prepared a selection. So you could go and start selecting. As I mentioned, you could hit UM and start drawing out a path. And now here's actually, I want to show you the difference. So when you're in free path, if you click and drag, it's trying to find the quickest, cleanest connection from point A to point B, which is cool. I mean, that's useful. But I prefer the live path, which just means wherever I drag my mouse, that's exactly what the path is going to be. So I meticulously went through and drew a spline where I was essentially like traveling around this model, making sure I never overlapped any given line, something kind of like this. And I imagine doing this, but for the entire model. And that's why I did. And now if you double click, that's my end resulting spline. And that's one spline with one start point and one end point. Oh wait, no, it's not. This is a different model I did that. So this one's several different ones. But in any case, they still work the same. In my Mesh to Spline, I will go to selection and drag that in as the selection. Now you see only that line is being created. I could hide the original mesh. And now that line is there. Once again, it's going to be running directly on the model. It's just stuck perfectly to them, which is pretty cool. Now I create a soft body. We're going to have to go easy on this because, like I said, soft bodies take a while to calculate. So in order to see this quickly, I'm going to say don't do self collisions. That way the spline doesn't care about colliding with itself. Each point is just in it for themselves. But I do have a dynamic floor. So if I were to, I think I don't even have to set anything else. If I just turn off enable and I hit play, he's now running and he jumps and he's just going to be looping. So if I click enable on the jump, then those parts just become dynamic and they will fall to the ground instantly. So pretty fun right out of the gate. You can make him follow the character a bit, but the recipe is kind of specific. I expect to make a tutorial about this in the future, but if we have it heavily follow the position, heavily follow the rotation, and put a lot of stiffness, like 5, then it starts doing a pretty good job of keeping up with the model. You can see he's like sinking through the floor. So these are individually trying to keep up with the model. But like I said, if you try and feed this into a sweep, like soft bodies just can't be fed live into sweeps very well. So you have to make it to Alembic and whatnot. But yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had with dynamics here. And if I turn that off, actually, yeah, now it's following the position of the model, but you see he just kind of explodes. But he has that initial movement, which by itself looks really cool as those go. And I mean, it would look a lot better if we had it self-colliding. I'll turn it on. Like it's safe to do. It just runs slowly. So if I play, these are now colliding with themselves. But you see, I don't get like real-time playback. What was I going to do? Oh, and we can also give it an initial force. So let's say custom initial velocity. And I can say I want it to pop into the air a bit. Turn it off. Oh, and don't follow the position anymore. So now I'll turn off the dynamics, hit play. And now as soon as I activate this, that initial velocity will trigger. So I can go, whoop, and he hops in the air and then crashes into the ground. We give him some rotation. So now as he's running, I could go flip, and he's going to jump in and flop onto the ground. So even right here, you can see there's a lot of fun to be had just on this character doing this crazy stuff. And even all of this, I can make a duplicate of that, and I have a different selection tag here. And it's just some random selections around the outside of the body. That one, the sweeps look a little bit hard-edged here, but let's put a sweep on this outer one. Sweep and end side. And yeah, so now that's there, and I could say that one should do some offset. Yeah, so I can push that away from the body more so that I can just explode out. But of course, keeping it subtle will look nice and clean. And yeah, just a sweep running on that outer one and a different spline on the inner one. And I don't know what will happen here, but let me just turn on both dynamics and whoa. Oh yeah, the one's set to fly up into the air and the other one is in the sweep. Like I said, the sweep, soft bodies don't like being fed into a sweep when they're running live. So yeah, that just won't work unless we bake as Alembic. But yeah, fun to be had with that type of setup. Yes, Tobias, thanks for mentioning that you can join, if you're new here and you don't catch too many streams, you can join the Rocket Lasso community by heading to the Rocket Lasso community page and joining the Slack channel, where there's the first announcements of plugins and little contests and challenges and announcements when live streams are happening, and just people helping each other out, answering questions, asking questions. It's a good community. So if you are somebody who wants to participate and you like helping out people, then you should come and join us. Let's see. Oh, yeah, Nux is saying to go back and show what I was going to talk about in the flat text. It's nothing too fancy, but let me pop it open. Text, I'll leave it just as this because the font doesn't matter. We'll go super flat on it and create a new, not Ricochet, a new Mesh to Spline. And I would like, I think we just consume it this time. So when I'm going to set the Polygon mode, and Polygon mode has the ability to shrink. We already saw it a bunch of times. I can shrink the individual polygons. And, that behaves exactly as you'd expect. The center point of every polygon is shrinking down. But we have the ability to trace the, how do I want to do this? Do I do trace outline? No, it's erase Ngons. Okay, so imagine this is the original shape. If we say erase Ngons, then now we only get the outline. But the Ngons still internally in Cinema exist as those individual polygons, but those internal lines can be ignored. So imagine that this is shrinking exactly the same way, but we wrote an algorithm to make sure that they stay connected even while the Ngon is going. So as I shrink this, the individual Ngons will shrink down, and I'm actually able to pinch this down kind of into like a skeleton of text, which is just, it would be a pain in the butt to do this any other way. But here we just have it automatically making sort of a skeleton out of it. So I just thought that was a neat effect. So we can just type in mesh and it updates the text and we get something like that. And again, this whole thing can be fed into a cloner and we'll feed 2 of them in. I would like to do a linear blend on Y. Blend, please. And I'll have one of them full size. So now I'm blending between those 2 states. So more, just blending between one in, offset and with the other one not offset. And with Ngons, they all shrink together but stay connected, which was it was almost a happy accident. It was like, well, let's see if this works. And it was like, oh my goodness, it does. But yeah, thank you for reminding me. Let's see, spaghetti, Eddie Spaghetti. Oh, I do. Oh, I don't have it handy, but I did some extra animations of like a guy exploding with, and I even put a spaghetti material on him. So it's funny you brought that up. Could you feed this into Smooth Spline for dynamics instead and use its thickness settings? Honestly, I don't know. A lot of, if you mean when it's dynamic, not so much, but you can totally feed it in. Yeah, the Smooth Spline, I don't know. I haven't played with it, and this isn't a good time to be experimentally opening that up. It'll be something I look into for if the Smooth Spline works. I mean, the Smooth Spline definitely works, but I don't know if it'll help with dynamics at all. And the only reason I won't explore it right now live is Cinema 4D spline dynamics are so particular that there might be one combination that works, but you'll do nine combinations that don't work before that, and that just wouldn't be a good use of our time right now. Nux, yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, there's a lot of cool things to make with Mesh To Spline, so that is appreciated. And if anybody makes anything cool, if you do some client work or just make a daily animation or whatever it is, make sure you tag me on social media so I can go and check it out and maybe even retweet it or something. So yeah, definitely hit me up on that. So let me see what else we got. Does anybody have any questions and we can go and tackle them? Because we've gone through a lot of my demos. It just goes to, I'm showing you kind of these fancy use cases, but I really feel like a lot of these are just your everyday uses of you want to convert something into splines and keep it live. Just take this landscape, make it a little bit taller. I can open up the Mesh to Spline and feed that in. And now we see the entire landscape. If I begin to do a little bit of threshold, you see that a bunch of it will erase out and we only get these sharper edges showing, which is pretty neat too. Those can then explode and spread out or shrink. Set this to exploded mode. So now I can do a percentage, but they're broken apart now. So as a, oh yeah, if I pull these back, you see them separated out from each other as they fly away. The apps, yeah, oh man, so many crazy combinations here. Polygon outline. We haven't talked too much about outline, but outline's a really it's really straightforward. There's not like a lot of reason to spend too much time talking about it. There are some limitations on outline. It's not like some magical thing. It's based on the polygons we see. It's just the polygons that happen to be outlining it. So it works really well on a figure or things that have like full volumes and they have a decent number of polygons. So under extensions, if I create this and I say outline, then it is now going to outline that exactly. And you can see based on my poly count that that's going to essentially be the resolution that we're seeing. If I were to grab the figure and say, hey, you need a couple of extra subdivisions, then obviously that's going to round itself out quite a bit and just work there, making nice rounded lines. Eventually, you'll be able to feed this through that smoothing and make those lines smoother. But yeah, that's creating a very nice combination there. And yeah, we could layer that up. You can also set that to visible only. Combining these, let me open this up and see if any of these effects jump out at you. Somebody shout it out, because we can look at how I put it together. Renders again. And this is the one I spent the most time on. Originally, the entire commercial was going to just be these, but I ended up making a couple extra animations. So this is one continuous falling figure. I did a couple different polygon outlines. Like sometimes there's a nice grid of polygons. Sometimes it was super low poly triangulated, but it's the exact same animation being fed through different meshes. So I'll just hit play on this. And we've just got, it's just me exploring, coming up with different combinations. There's a bunch of outlines, kind of a shatter look. That one's fun where it's a bunch of just outlines. We can go back at any point and check any of these out. I just recorded some beats per minute on that one. I like that exploded guy. Volume. Retro. Bunch of those wires. A waffle guy, waffle copper. Yeah, so yeah, I just put this entire thing together and it's just like, oh, it's just a funny animation to go explore different styles as it goes. And I made a fancy espresso rig to be able to, that was one scene file, and the espresso rig would activate one section and then deactivate the previous one, so it could just play as one continuous animation as I did each effect. But yeah, this one is pretty crazy where it's a series of outlines. I wonder if we could set that one up quickly just because it's weird. Yeah, maybe we can even stick with the figure here. So there is the figure, and here is the outline of the figure. Let's hide. Oh, yeah, I'll remote into it because I'll make more than one. So remote into the figure, hide the figure, override. Oh, that's why that was missing. I had to hit override because I didn't have quite enough points. And he's pretty high poly now, but I don't think that's a problem. And okay, so we got one outline. Let's make a second one. Create a cloner. Feed them both inside. And on one outline, we'll offset it a bunch. So you see those will start pushing out a bunch. And then in the cloner, I guess there are a lot of segments there. And the cloner will create a lot, but that's fine. Blend. Oh, blend. Blend mode. Oh, and that's grid. So let's make sure it's on linear so I can set the exact amount. So there's 11 points of transition between them. And you see a nice, perfect transition between one and the other. Now, depending on what the angle is that we're looking at, I guess this figure won't work quite as well because it's, he's got separate objects instead of one continuous one, which we could get around. But anyway, what I was going to say is we can feed this entire thing into a volume builder and then feed that into a volume mesher. And if we begin to decrease the scale of that, increase that, and decrease this down, then we end up with these crazy weird flat layers as they go. And let me take that one outline. I'm actually going to push it inward. So I'll say -5 to, oh, let's go -6, 7, 8. There we go. So now you can see, and it's going to be slow because of the volume, but as I rotate around, like every one of those outlines is updating as it spins to look at the camera, and it's creating this flat area. That would look a lot better if we could smooth it. And we could grab the figure and make this be not quite so many segments around. And then, I'll see if I can show it clearly. Oh, keep the figure on. So if I were to select these Mesh to Splines and go into Spline mode, I could enable, set that to B Spline, and again, set that to like a uniform subdivision. And you can now see, let me turn it on and off. You can see the line looks pretty smooth here. Oh, it does update as I move. But if I turn that off, you see it's kind of harsh. And if I turn it on, then it's going to smooth it out a bit. And then that can all be fed back in and get our nice smooth blob. And then you combine that a couple times with maybe a dilate to inflate it a bit. And when I say a bit, I do mean a bit. And then a smooth to smooth out that end result a bit. And yeah, you can get a pretty cool, weird looking blob guy. the smooths really slow down. But yeah, look at this crazy effect. If somebody sent me this animation, they're like, how do you make that? I'd be like, what are we even looking at? I can't even fathom. So, oh man, so much to explore and play with. And this is one where I think, just from a utility standpoint, this tool is probably going to come up a lot just during our regular live streams. I think somebody's going to be like, oh, I want to do this effect. And it's going to be like, oh, we can do that really well using Mesh to Spline. And, you know, just character animation stuff and rendering, like I said, third-party rendering. I kind of want to go tinker with that car some more because that was just really fun of creating this. Anybody who got here a little bit later, we do have our car here, our super stable car that renders out in Redshift. Let's activate that again. And yeah, that should render super duper quick. I don't like how wide those window lines are. So where is the window? I believe, well, what's nice is you can just select the line. I think it might be that one. Yeah, definitely that one. Yeah, that should definitely be like 0.1. Bing! There we go. That makes it a little bit cleaner. But yeah, you can see how quickly that is set. Let's make this background darker. That might look even nicer. Yeah. So yeah, pop this open. You can see how quickly our render is resolving and making a sketchy look inside of Redshift, which doesn't have any kind of toon shader. And modify your looks, create whatever you want. Animate the whole thing. Yeah, Real Pixel. That the smoothing one is a sneak preview for a upcoming plugin that's coming out. So I just wanted to show that there was going to be something cool because I almost never give sneak previews. It's not too far away, but it's a little ways away. Can you? Yeah, you could totally use Mesh to Spline to outline text that is made by a Ricochet plugin. Can you use tracer with it? It depends what you mean by use tracer with it, because the tracer by itself, well, actually, as a question, does a tracer follow a spline? I don't know. So here is a regular cinema object. I will add a vibrate tag on there with some 90, 90, 90 rotation. And if I feed that into a tracer object, does it trace it? Yes, it does. So if that is tracing it, then if we create a whatever shape and make that shape be moving, let's give it some position as well. 222, 222, 222, 0.5. And I will now add the Mesh to Spline. So the Mesh to Spline should be fed that object. I will remote into it, hide it. So yeah, that is now doing its thing. So, and we'll see the motion in a little bit. Oh, okay. The ramifications of your question just popped into my head more, but in any case, I should be able to add a tracer now, which is feeding into the Mesh to Spline, and let's see. Yeah, that is properly tracing it. Now, here is the caveat, or the important detail here, and it makes perfect sense. The tracer works completely fine. I thought the 222 was going to be a lot, but let's add an extra 111. There we go. Now it's moving around. So the tracer can only it's the way the tracer works. It only works if the object doesn't change point count. So we can do anything we want with Mesh to Spline as long as we're not changing the point count. So something like offsetting it in space, that will work perfectly fine. That should be able to work. But if we did something like the facing view, so if I said view front, now we're seeing only those polygons, but as this moves and rotates, let me just turn that off. As this moves and rotates, you see that lines are popping in and out of existence. My assumption here is that the tracer is going to get really confused by that. So yeah, you see it's still working, but it's probably randomly interconnecting one point to another point and jumping around because the indexes are changing. So as long as you are creating something that is stable, and a lot of things would be stable, like we could do polygon, that's completely stable. We could animate these polygons, doing some sort of motion, that would be completely stable. Offsetting any amount, that is stable. But facing angle wouldn't be, outline wouldn't be. Outline would be constantly changing as well. But yeah, there's potentially possibilities in the future, but a lot of this will work perfectly fine. On pink tracer limit from end. I finally, in my head, I finally know that from end is the one that I always want. I always would forget that, and I finally have it in my head. So yeah, tracer working perfectly well on there. Scrolling up, finding questions. Does anyone have any other questions about this new tool? Otherwise, I think we're about ready to wrap up. Yeah, let's see. Bobby. Oh, that's going back a ways, but thank you, Bobby, for picking it up. Yeah, Real Pixel, appreciated. Thank you so much, everybody. It's really fun. It's really frustrating to be working on this for a really long time and not putting it out there in the world too much, but I like the policy of not putting it out there before it's ready, because as soon as you put something out in the world, if I were like, oh, here's a preview, here's something we're working on, then there's going to be people who are like desperate. They're like, I'm working on a job and I really need that right now. And it's just not in the state that could be shipped, and we can't like protect it, and we couldn't wrap everything up or get it built for somebody else. When we're building it, like when we're building, it's often just built in R20 and it wouldn't even load in our S24. So yeah, the limitations are there. So I don't like talking about plugin until it's almost completely ready to go. And the Helper Splines, I just want to, because the Helper Splines are Helper Splines, they're not as flashy. So I don't mind putting those out into the world a little bit more to be like, oh yeah, these are some utility splines that are going to be able to help everybody with things as we move forward. Oh, so much fun. Does it work with X particles? I haven't checked, but it just goes to, it's a spline. We're outputting this at the end of the day as a spline in Cinema 4D. So if X particles could do something on spline, that'll totally feed through. I don't have X particles, so I can't specifically test it. But yeah, there's no reason it wouldn't work. It is just a spline. Baking splines to Alembic, there's not super a reason to do it here, but just to show you, let's turn all that off actually, and just make a brand new Mesh To Spline and remote into the T-Rex, hide the T-Rex, and you know, we've got the T-Rex here. We can make that do whatever we want. In this case, how about a little bit of threshold, and we'll make another one, and we'll have that be the outline. I'll push that out a little bit, and we can change the color. But anyway, well, I want this, mainly this one, but as I spin around, you see that the outline will update and follow us. But baking as Alembic is really, really nice. You can always just right-click on a spline, bake as Alembic. It runs through really quickly, playing through the timeline. I can turn off our Mesh To Spline, and now I just have this Alembic version. So if you're ever sending this off to a client or somebody who doesn't have Mesh To Spline, well, first of all, you know, tell your coworker to go get Mesh To Spline. But other than that, you can just bake it as Alembic, and that will now go and behave exactly like a spline, which is pretty useful. And especially, like I said, if you're doing dynamics, then baking as Alembic is an absolute must. But Alembic is so great. I love we can just right-click on things and bake as Alembic. Like 4 versions ago or whenever, you had to bake out the entire scene and bring it back in again. Just right-clicking is like so good. Yeah, I guess I'll wrap that up as one final thing. Well, here's some important details. First of all, like I said, in a couple weeks, we're going to be releasing a new tool. And as mentioned, it is not these helper ones. Those will be coming soon, though. And in addition, oh, we've got our discount code. So just as a final shout out here, make sure you've got mere minutes at this point, about 20 minutes to go and pick this up. So if you saw anything you like, if you want to support Rocket Lasso, the best way to do it is go pick up a tool that can help you out, make you some money by selling these cool things to clients or creating awesome animations that you can sell directly. And yeah, it's appreciated, any support, but mostly I like making tools that help people. And as soon as we get to this wave of plugins out the door, I'm looking forward to getting back to regular stuff, getting some tutorials out there, and all of that will be great because I haven't done it in a while. I'm going to play the commercial, and if anybody has any questions about it, maybe we can tackle one more thing from the scene file, but otherwise that will be wrapping this up real soon. So here is Mesh To Spline. as mentioned, a whole bunch of different scene files come along. Let's maybe pop that open and see if there's any other cool ones to take a look at. Kent, that's appreciated. Thank you so much. Will you get notifications on updates? Yes. If there's ever a major update, if for some reason, well, if we end up finding like a giant bug that breaks things, but especially if we, like when we release 1.1 of any given plugin, and we have ideas, like every plugin that we release, we have ideas of where it can even grow and do more in the future. With all of that, we will send out a newsletter specifically to the people who purchased that version, so you'll always be able to get an update. And at any given point, Gumroad will have the most up-to-date version, and we're going to be very careful with the versioning numbers, because right now it's on 1.0, and if we come out with a 1.001, because we found like some tiny bugs that don't really affect too much, like that'll automatically be uploaded. And if we get a giant update, then we'll let everybody know for sure. And, you know, I'll be putting out on social media and whatnot as long as there's cool new things to show. And yeah, some of the ideas we have for this one is going to make it even more powerful, which I'm looking forward to for sure. Justin, also, thank you so much for picking it up. Oh, and MoGraph is here, but only just recently. Or MoGraph, which, you know, great name. But yeah, totally. This T-Rex is actually set up really well to show it. So here is Mr. T-Rex. Turn on Polygon and get rid of Threshold. So yeah, fields are used in several different places. Let's use Edge with... Actually, yeah, we've just got the T-Rex stomping around. So how about turning on Restrict Fields? So we're going to restrict the current selection to fields. So fields turned on, you see a field tab turns on. Feed it whatever I like. Let's do a random field. And that random field can be any scale. I'll make it large enough so we can kind of see the pattern. And hit play. And now only where this noise is will that show up. We can animate that. We could, I wish that there was an animation speed. I know you can animate it. I could take this and drag it back in space, but I kind of wish there was the automatic animation inside of it. So yeah, fields work in that way. But then also, let's turn that off. We can also turn on fields in the offset. So if I push all of these out into the air and turn on, and like you can be in like polygon mode, so you see each polygon is exploded out. Look at this tail, it looks super crazy that way. But yeah, turn on fields there, and we get the offset field, and that is being fed that same random field. So if I hit play, that is now traveling through, and I can grab this and pull it back through them, and fields are now driving that offset. So yeah, those are the two places that fields are implemented into it. I would love to implement it in more places. Unfortunately, there's a limitation in the code inside of the SDK from Cinema, from Maxon, that it only wants you to ever have one field at a time. You'll notice that all the Cinema 4D objects, there's only ever one field. We're trying to find a way around that. We have some experiments, but we're not 100% confident in it yet, so we couldn't do it. But man, my personal dream would be being able to be like, oh, fields are driving grow, fields are driving threshold, fields are driving everything. If you want, you could turn on fields and make it drive it. But right now we have to pick and choose where it's going to get applied. So that is where it is right now. Another checkbox we didn't talk about, we've got draw original points. That'll just put a dot on every single point of the original model, just in case you sort of lose it. Those don't render, of course. And then we've got the help button and the examples page. Right now there's nothing on the examples page, but I'm going to be filling that up with lots of scene files as time goes on, combining all the different spline tools of just cool final renders and animations and experiments. I've got a couple files prepared for Ricochet for like the spiderweb stuff and some tutorials to go along with it, but I just haven't had time to release them. But yeah, it's really great. It's really fun. I've been having an absolute blast playing around with this as we've been preparing to get it out the door. Let's see. I might be jumping on the Maxon stream briefly, so actually stopping a few minutes early might be a good idea. I think that might wrap this up. Real Pixel, no, this is R20 and beyond. So as long as you have R20 or beyond, PC or Mac, it is totally compatible. So that, I think, is going to wrap this up. I'm going to switch back to my camera, but keep in mind it's going to be blown out because of, I think, maybe the video card driving the camera. It's an external video card, and I think it maybe is dead or dying. So here's the blown out black and white image of it. But that should be wrapping this up. Thank you so much for checking it out. I'm looking forward to showing off the next plugin, which we've also been working very hard on, and it'll be really cool when those Helper Splines come out too. So That's what we've been focused on. It's been taking a while. I mean, we've been working on Mesh To Spline for a long time. Parts of this were built almost like 2 years ago, and we've just been jumping around to a lot of different tools. At one point, we were thinking everything would be a giant pack, but then we ended up making the tools are so big. Like if we were making a collection of tools and it's pretty much like, oh, it's a sphere, it's a cube, it's a cone, then those would be really easy to be like, oh, here's a bundle of 10. But when we make something as big as Ricochet, as big as Mesh To Spline, you can't bundle those together. How would I even make the training if something was that big? So eventually we decided to break them apart and start releasing individually. Eventually there'll probably be some sort of bundle, but we don't have a plan for that yet. So keep an eye out for that. There might be some sort of complete the bundle option, but technology-wise, I have to figure that out yet. Thank you, everybody, for coming and hanging out, checking out all the cool new stuff. Very exciting to show off. Thank you, everybody, for picking it up. It's the best way to support me and my brothers and the work that we do. Our only job, seriously, our only job. I haven't taken on any freelance or client work in years. So our job is to make tools to help make your work easier and faster and unlock things you could have never done before. So picking up those tools helps us, and our goal is always for it to super duper help you as well. So yeah, that will wrap it up. Again, thank you so much, everybody, and here's the commercial one time, and I'll see you next week for a completely regular live stream. And as a bit of news, I'm going to be joining the VFX and Chill on Friday along with Seth, so that should be fun. So keep an eye out for links to that. It'll just be hanging out. We're going to try and recreate some VFX shot from somewhere, but yeah, that'll do it. That should be all the news. Thank you, everybody, and I'll see you next week or on Friday if you join that stream. So, bye-bye.